Well, hello and welcome to 2020. It's time to be a truly opinionated ENTP for once and not really give a fuck about other people's feelings. There's been a couple comments about traveling, and I'm definitely going to address that subject a lot because I think it is so incredibly beneficial to all human development, no matter what type you are. But first, I want to talk about just moving in general. And I'm a person, I was born in Arizona. I lived there till I was almost 5. And then we moved to Napa, California, and I lived there till I was 20. Then I moved to Seattle, and I lived there for about a year and a half. And then I moved back to California for a year, and I moved to Oregon. I lived there for 2.5 years. And then I moved to Tennessee, and I lived there for 8 years. Then I lived in South Carolina for 2 years, lived in Mexico for 2 years, and then off and on in Mexico for 2 years. It was kind of like Myrtle Beach and Mexico together. But then I lived in Nebraska for a year. And now I'm currently in Texas, and I've been here for 6 months. Okay. With each location I've lived in and moved to, this is not going on vacation. That's not the same thing. So when people say that, oh, I know I benefit from travel, it depends on what you mean by that. If you're just a tourist staying in a hotel that's ran for and by, American sympathizers or people who want to support, your American culture, like most people, for instance, when they go to Cancun, where I lived, they stay in resorts, all inclusives, and the only Mexicans they see are the ones that work there. They don't learn any Spanish. They don't know shit about the culture. They have no idea how Mexicans even live. And yet they're like, oh, I've been coming here for 20 years. I'm all about this. No, you're not. You don't know the fuck you're talking about. You're retarded. And this kind of stuff really, really pisses me off because when people live in the city they were born in, and then they die in the exact same city, they are inferior in every way culturally. I'm just going to say that right now, out straight. They're not developed humans. They have no idea how to deal outside of their little echo chamber of their own existence. And they're literally inferior in every way culturally. And last night, at the party, I was politically accosted by 2 deranged ESFPs who, would you guess it? Oh, they were born and raised in Texas. They still live here in Texas, and they're going to die here in Texas. And yet they want to tell me how the world works. And not only that, is they don't even travel. They don't even go on vacation anywhere. And of course, these types of people also get super intimidated by me because they're like talking about something, and I'm like, well, yeah, I lived in Greece. It was interesting when I was there. They're like, what do you mean you lived there? And I was like, well, I was there for about a month and a half. I lived in an apartment with a Greek family, and different things like that. And so I learned a lot. And they always want to pretend like they know how the world works because they watch news on TV. And it's always, whenever you run into someone who's a social justice warrior, whether on the right or the left, this is bar none pretty much always the case. It's always a deranged person who is the political party that's opposite of the state they live in. So let me give you an example. A deranged leftist typically is going to be someone who's born and raised in Texas, born and raised in Nebraska, born and raised in, in a red state. A deranged right-wing person is going to be somebody who was born and raised in California or born and raised in New York and things like that. And they always want to talk in absolutes. They have no idea what it's like to live in a red state or in a blue state, of the party they're promoting. And it is just so fascinating to me, as I have a conversation with these people, and I'm just like, I hate to be like an elitist, but this happens all the time. It's just like, man, I am just so much more culturally superior than these people I'm talking to. They literally believe what they say. And they literally think that's how the world works. And it's sad to me Because, I mean, I used to be a pretty deranged Californian vegan, super hippie environmentalist. Now, granted, I'm still love talking about environmental issues, and I care about that. But when I was like that, all I knew was California. All I knew politically was literally California, Oregon, and Washington. And so it was literally all straight blue. It wasn't really until I lived in Tennessee that I got a better perspective on life and kind of understood more of how the world works. And now, granted, I was miserable my first 2 years. It's really hard to adapt when you get that culture shock, you know? And by the time I left Tennessee, you know, I kind of could compare apples and oranges, you know, and I can come to my own personal, you know, opinion based on life experience, you know? And so this is the thing it just infuriates me. And this is why I enjoy talking to people, you know, especially from out of the country, or people who, you know, who are also, I mean, people who grew up in military bases always seem to be like, people always say they have a lot of emotional problems. I don't find that to be the case at all. I find them actually quite interesting. Now, they might have some emotional issues due to the fact that their parents were busy and, you know, it's not easy to be that unstable at a very young age. I get that. But when you're dealing with conversations with people and they're totally deranged, they're up to no agreement, you know, just have no idea what they're talking about, you know, I guarantee they're going to be from the area they grew up in and they never ventured out of it. They hang out with their friends in their little echo chamber and they think they know how the world works and they don't. And it's sad. And sure enough, you know, this is so funny. We were talking about ESFPs this year, and they're the new morality trolls, in my opinion. So every single time I get in some kind of moral argument, it's with an ESFP. Every single damn time. They're really aggressive people. They have that SE hero, and so they're different than ENFPs. ENFPs can be aggressive, but not really. You know, so they're going to do that whole FI parent, FE critic thing on you and really insist that you see things morally their way. And which is, it's funny and silly, especially in the ones that are crazy, you know, the social justice warriors who scream and yell and throw shit, you know, they're always the ones that like never left essentially the tit of their hometown. But now I've met tons of ESFPs who are international, you know, and awesome. You know, they're educated, they understand kind of how the world works, they understand different cultures in different countries and different states, and I love them. You know, I had really, really close ESFPs when I lived in Tennessee because he was actually from California too. We got along great, you know. Could talk about California, what we hated about it, what we loved about it. We could talk about Tennessee, what we hated about it, what we loved about it. I mean, for the most part, you know, you can't have those conversations outside if you're with somebody who's in the hometown they grew up in. And when I get attacked on Facebook, for instance, it always seems to be the same case. I get attacked by ESFPs that live in Chicago, never left Chicago, and they want to sit here and tell me how the world works, how people should vote, and they don't know anything, you know? Or they're from New York, for instance. There's another ESFP who's been insane attacking me lately. And guess where he was born? New York. Guess where he's going to die? New York. And guess how he's going to, guess what level of cultural diversity and what kind of cultural maturity he's going to die with? None. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that. Yes, people who, and granted, I have friends that are like this, who live, were born, and are going to die in your hometown. You are culturally deficient and inferior to me and other people like me who move around and experience life and experience other cultures and understand this in every single way. No ifs, ands, or buts.